Radfar, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Clearsprings Technologies, which is a social sharing platform. Thank you, Hooman, for being with us.
Thank you.
And today we want to talk to all of you students out there that are interested in becoming entrepreneurs. A little bit of a background on Hooman. He was recently named one of Tech's best entrepreneurs in Business Week and was also nominated for Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year. So needless to say, he's very accomplished and he probably has a little bit of wisdom that he can impart to you all. So let's just go ahead and get started.
Let's do it.
Hooman, did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Not always. So when I was younger, I actually thought I wanted to be an animator. But as I got older, I got into engineering. And it was really during the dot-com boom that I realized there was this whole profession where you could take creativity to a whole new level and build something that actually generated new ideas, and that being a business. So it was probably in college actually that I really understood that I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
And was it a particular group, or was there a mentor on campus? I mean, how did you kind of really fine-tune once you decided you were interested? Like, how did you clear that path forward?
So there was actually a very specific presentation that I can remember that really sealed the deal for me. There was a guy by the name of Josh Koppelman, and Josh founded a company called Half.com, and he was a Penn alum, and he came back and was speaking to people about starting companies and everything else, and I looked at the guy and he kind of looked like me, so I thought, wow, like this is actually possible. One piece of advice I would give to entrepreneurs, or anyone for that matter, is surround yourself with mentors. So I had a guy by the name of Tom Castle, who was at UPenn, who was an advisor of mine, and he was, you know, the first of many people who helped guide me along the way because I didn't know much.
So in undergrad, what did you study? What was your major and minor?
So I had a dual degree in computer science and economics.
Okay. And do you think you have to be in one particular major or minor field to go into entrepreneuring, or is there a variety of subjects that you could study?
I think there's a number of ways you can get into it, and it really depends on the field. So in tech entrepreneurship, I think a very classic way to enter is to be a trained engineer. If you go to Silicon Valley, for instance, a lot of those people are technologists, but you know, it really takes all kinds, and I've seen founders from all different kinds of backgrounds, people with fine arts degrees, people with sociology degrees. I think the most important thing is that you have a passion for what you're doing, that you're willing to really listen and network and try to find people who know more than you to accomplish your vision, whatever your passion is, and be able to learn quickly. So yes, I mean, it was beneficial for technology to have that engineering background, but I do think you can come from any background with respect to education. It's more those core qualities that make the entrepreneur.
Okay. So once you decided to go ahead and, you know, start Clearspring, what was the first thing you did? I would imagine it'd be kind of daunting. You have this idea and you want to embark, but you know, where do you start?
Well, the idea often is not even as well formed. So in our case in particular, it really wasn't. The first thing that I did actually when starting to even conceive of Clearspring was create an advisory board. And at the time I was in graduate school at Carnegie Mellon when I started thinking about these things. So the advisory board was actually very closely affiliated with the school. So there was one guy who was a very close mentor and friend of mine, Frank Demler at Carnegie Mellon. There was a close family friend who was in Silicon Valley who raised money, this guy named Dave White. The dean of the engineering school was another one. And really each of them brought a different aspect to the table, which I didn't have. So whether it be technology strength, whether it be operation strength or financing strength. And what ends up happening is by interacting with them, they actually flesh out the components with you. So I think the very first thing, and again, I know I'm being a little repetitive, is you have to surround yourself with people who know a lot more than you and can push you farther faster than you're comfortable.
And did you start like as a staff person at another startup first before you kind of launched into this, or were you lucky enough that on your first, you know, try you nailed it?
I wouldn't say I nailed it, but this was my first job and my first company from a full-time perspective. So I had internships in undergrad and done research, and in graduate school, in fact, I think it was the summer, not the first summer, but the second summer, I interned at a venture capital firm, and that exposed me further, but I never really had any work experience, which was really challenging at the beginning, right? Because you don't even have this like rudimentary background to draw from. So you're talking to people, how do I set up payroll? Well, I've never been paid before. So it was just like, what do you even think of? What are the first things to think of? So again, I think as long as you have a very, very ferocious appetite for learning, assume you're wrong most of the time, and really talk to people who are better, brighter, you're going to go really fast.
Are there any sites or any kind of resources that you would tell students to go to, where they can at least research about the world of entrepreneurship and get more familiar with it?
Sure. So I think it depends on what types of resources you're looking at. So for instance, if you're looking at venture funding and venture financing, there's two guys, one of which was I had mentioned before who had spoken. Josh Koppelman has a great blog. I believe it's called Red Eye VC. And there's another guy, Fred Wilson, who's a very iconic web investor. He's invested in Tumblr, Twitter, ComScore, which is down the street. They both have a lot of advice on how to start companies. And although their context is technology, I think they're applicable to a lot of different companies. But there's a lot of different VCs now who are writing about the startup process and everything else. Just more generally, I think is a good resource for entrepreneurs. I found myself looking at Quick MBA a lot because there's these just like really quick and dirty how to do a business plan and how to do a marketing plan, just these little factoids which at least give you a skeleton to ask, like, what question do I ask?
And I guess I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
First is, they say, there are obvious places throughout the United States that you should be if you're interested in kind of the tech world or just, I guess, the entrepreneur world, right? They say yep. Silicon Valley or certain areas. Is that true still? I mean, here you are, right outside of Washington, D.C., you're in Virginia. So, I mean, do you feel confined being here? Do you have to be flexible to move everywhere? I mean, what do you recommend if people are thinking about where they should move if they're going to start their own,
their own company?
Exactly.
It varies in the field, but very specifically around technology, I think there's no place on earth like Silicon Valley. I mean, the company or the area generated countless tech giants, and from back in the past, you look at the HPs of the world to now you're looking at Facebooks and Googles. There's just something about the infrastructure there which is so different. It's fair to say Silicon Valley is the best from an absolute basis perspective place to start, but there are advantages to starting at different places. So for example, Ted Leonsis, who I mentioned, who's one of our board members, is on the board of Groupon. Groupon is based in Chicago, and it's it is the fastest growing company of all time. There's another company, obviously locally, Living Social, which is based in DC. I mean, they're incredibly fast paced, fast growth, and Tim O'Shaughnessy and that team have done an amazing job growing it in DC, and I think it's a $3 billion company to grow in like 2-3 years. So I would say that it's becoming easier to start businesses in other places, and that entrepreneurs should really take heart in that. That's awesome. It's amazing that you can start a business anywhere and grow really quickly.
Do you recommend somebody starting on their own? Obviously, I know you said surround yourself with mentors, create an advisory board, or do you think it's better to do it with in a collaboration, have a team, somebody that you're working with? Is it easier one way or the other?
Most definitely get a team. I think first and foremost, if you have the ability to attract a team, both from you have the capital or the interest of those people, whether it be for stock or whatever, you can't even replace having co-founders, and so the mentors and advisors are incredibly necessary. Being by yourself is very tough, especially when you're in an environment of no's, which is the environment that a startup is. It's constantly no, whether it's no, this idea won't work, no, you're not the right person, no, it's not the right market. You're hearing no's, and to have that kind of support around you of a team, not just from getting things done, but psychologically, it's invaluable. So if you can do it, absolutely attract a team, a core team as early as possible, and they work hand in hand with the mentors. They're not mutually exclusive, so you can do them in any order.
And with the movie that came out about Facebook, and you hear all these things about how great different companies are to work for, it kind of sounds very ideal to work for a startup. It's really fun and creative, and you've got game rooms and creativity rooms and all these things. Is that true? I mean, what is the day in the life of an entrepreneur, if you can explain one? I know it varies every day, but
So for the entrepreneur, I think it's very different than for the person who works at the entrepreneurial company. An entrepreneur, I think the challenges change constantly. So for example, a company there's different ways to think of a company scaling. So there's revenue and employees. So let's just take employees. So when you're 0 to 5 people, it's an incredibly different experience. I mean, you're all there, ground floor, working on everything. Everyone's exposed to these ideas, but the hours per week are horrendous. You're talking 100-hour weeks, and so that can be fun if that's your personality. But if you came from a government contracting perspective, for instance, that might be your nightmare. When you're going from like 10 to 40, for instance, it's a different growth challenge altogether. You have logistics, operations. You start to put in management team. When you're going from 40 to 100, it's different as well. So I think it depends on when you join, what your experience is, because a startup experience as your later stage is very different than the earliest stage. But I would say it's one of the most rewarding experiences one can have, whether it be from starting a company or joining it, because the amount of latitude that you have, the amount of creativity, the ability to grow. When you're in a larger company, someone's not going to throw a big project at you, and if you're successful, you potentially can run a whole division or a unit, because you're in this fast growth marketplace where, us, for instance, we're hiring 2 or 3 people a week. So, we're just trying to build as fast as we can. We didn't have offices in certain areas, and now we do. So there's just always all this opportunity. So if you're into growth and you want to be challenged, more so than you probably are comfortable, then it's a great environment.
Okay, so now my last question for you.
Okay.
We like to end pretty much every professional profile with the same question.
Okay.
What piece of advice would you give Iranian-American students who want to go and become an entrepreneur? What would you say that they should absolutely avoid, and what would you say they should absolutely do?
I think absolutely avoid, especially for Iranian-Americans, because we have such our culture favors process and education so much. In particular, our parents are very much, everyone has the Iranian parents, like, go to Harvard and be a lawyer and those kinds of things, or a doctor, sorry, Mom. But, I think don't approach entrepreneurship as a career or a path. Approach it as almost a philosophy, and, you can constantly learn, and there's no set path. So if you're an engineer, you may have the idea first before you have the experience. If you're coming from a different angle, you might have the experience first and not an idea. And so there's these non-linear ways to get there, and that's, from us culturally, in particular from having immigrant parents, that's harder to absorb a lot of the time, because they want to have the, you were number 1 in your high school, you were number 1 in your college, or number 1 in your grad school, and then there's this thing you do, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is just, that's not what happens. So that would be the number 1 thing I would avoid. The number 1 thing I would recommend, though, is to keep your family very, very, very close, which is also another great thing, I think, from an Iranian-American perspective. The families are very close, because I can tell you my mom and my dad and my family were invaluable support. And I think when you look at the way that Iranian-American parents, just the way they are with their kids and the way that they believe in them, and just as they think that their kids are number 1 in everything, even though they're not all the time, you really need that, as I had mentioned before. When you're starting something, you live in a world of no's, and so to have that base is invaluable. So it's great from that perspective to come from this culture. So I think that can be a real help. And there's a huge amount of Iranian Americans in the entrepreneurship tech world. I mean, one of the founders of Dropbox, which is like one of the fastest growing companies, is an Iranian guy, really smart guy. There's just tons and tons of them all over the place.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you so much.
Great. And
be sure to tune in to NIACampus.org for future episodes of Professional Profiles.